What are the biggest question marks facing the Cleveland Browns going into the 2025 season? Well, how much time do you have? Hey guys, welcome back to my channel, or if you are new here, then please do me a favour and hit that subscribe button. So in my previous video, I was in a good mood, spoke about all of the things I was looking forward to seeing from the Browns going into this season, things that I was excited about. Fast forward a few more days, I am still ill, as you could probably tell from the sound of my throat and my voice. Not in quite as good of a mood, so what better day to do the opposite side of the spectrum and talk about the biggest question marks facing the Browns going into this season. You know, if the Browns are, if their season is going to be derailed and they are going to have a disaster season, what are the things that are going to, cause that and be the reason for that happening? Let's jump straight into it. Don't want to waste any time before my throat actually finally decides to give out and I can't speak anymore. But of course, it starts with the offense. That is the biggest question mark facing this team. If you ask anyone talking about the Browns what the biggest question mark for this team is, they're going to give you the same answer. It is the offense. It has been the biggest Achilles heel on this team the last few seasons. It has been the biggest reason they have not had the success that we've expected from this roster the last few seasons. Last in pretty much every major statistical category. One of the worst third down offenses we've ever seen in NFL history during certain stretches of this period. So, the biggest question mark is, can this offense finally turn it around, finally look like an actual capable NFL offense? Returning back to Kevin Stefanski's bread and butter, running the ball more, zone running, play action, safer football, shall we say. Will we see a improved, production and output from this offense? That is the number one question going into this season. And of course, it starts with the quarterback position. This position has been dysfunctional at best, shall we say. Even in 2023, going to the playoffs, we started 5 different quarterbacks that year. We've had no consistency out of the quarterback position. I mean, you can say for a very long time, but especially in the last few years under this, within this offense, and of course since the trade for Deshaun Watson. Flacco is the starter. He will be starting this year, but Flacco hasn't started a whole season since 2017. He hasn't been a winning quarterback outside of his brief stint here since that same time as well. So, can he play at a high enough level, and can he play a whole season? That is a massive question mark, and something that, recent history would suggest not. How will the rookies behind him look? How will Shadur or Dylan look if what at this point feels like inevitable happens and the Browns do go to their second or third quarterback within this season? What will we see out of those guys? They're a third and a fifth round pick. Expectations shouldn't exactly be that high. Will they show enough for the Browns to not draft a quarterback next year? All of that stuff. There's just so many questions, facing this quarterback room, as there has been the last few years. And even though the Browns did address this room through the draft and obviously bringing in Kenny Pickett, signing Joe Flacco, and by addressed, I don't mean actually addressed, I just mean in terms of they had no quarterbacks at one point, this year, and obviously had to make moves to bring guys in. That's what they did. But, will we actually see anything out of anyone in this room to suggest that the Browns aren't going to draft a quarterback next year with one of those 2 first-round picks that they have? Of course, we're not going to see that out of Joe Flacco, because as good as he is this year, even if he's unbelievable, 5,000 yards and leads us to the playoffs, he's still 40 years old. You still have to think long-term. And of course, with the 2 rookies, A, will they get a chance? And B, if they do get the chance, will they be able to show enough in what will be quite a limited amount of time to obviously, maybe potentially answer that question and, put off the Browns from drafting a quarterback next year? So so many question marks facing this quarterback room. What are we going to see? That is obviously the biggest factor on this offense. It doesn't matter how good the rest of the offense is if we get terrible quarterback play again, like we have seen in the last few years. So that is the biggest question mark within the biggest question mark on this team. Sticking with the offense, of course, the offensive line. This is a position group that I have been, sounding the alarm bells for a few years now. It's been almost annoying seeing like analysts and commentators in the games the last few years talk about how good this offensive line is based on what they did in 2020. When us Brown fans are sat there going, no, this offensive line is on its last legs, is not holding up, and has not been good the last few years. And you could argue that the biggest reason for that has been injuries, the turnover in that room. The Browns have started 20 guys on that offensive line in the last couple of seasons. So yes, that could be the biggest reason for that. But we've also seen, Wyatt Teller. Yes, he's been good in spots, but he's not been able to recreate that form from 2020, from previous years. And Jack Conklin, of course, with the injuries. Joel Bitonio is the only guy in there you could say has been solid throughout, I suppose. So, this offensive line, they've somewhat invested in it this offseason, maybe not as much as I would have liked. But obviously the biggest thing is health. Can they hold up as a unit? And then if they don't hold up as a unit, will the depth pieces that they brought in be serviceable enough for, to not get in a position like we have seen in a few games the last few years where the Browns have got their 5th and 6th string tackles out there, and it's just impossible to get anything going on offense in the passing game and the run game as well, because you're just unable to block. So the offensive line is, of course, another massive question mark for this team. I do think it will be better, but how much better, and will it be good enough for the Browns to do what they want to do this year with running the ball more, and how they run the ball as well. So that's obviously another massive question mark as well. When talking about running the ball, the run game has been absolutely atrocious. Was pretty bad in 2023, and then was just absolutely awful last year. They ranked 29th in rushing yards, 30th in rushing touchdowns. Of course, this has coincided with the injuries to Nick Chubb, other injuries in that room as well, like quite a lot of these position groups and quite a lot of areas on the Browns that have struggled in the last few years. But this was something that I spoke about probably more than anything in the off-season in regards to the offense, was the run game, and improving the run game, investing in the run game and overhauling the run game, especially considering they were going back to Kevin Stefanski's bread and butter. They were obviously going to run the ball more. They drafted 2 running backs. I was happy about that. They obviously, they did invest in the run game, but, fast forward to now, Quinshon Judkins is still not signed. Probably unlikely that he is going to play in this game. I would be very surprised at this point if he signs on Thursday or Friday and somehow plays in this game. But even still, I do just think with the Browns going back to the concepts, to Kevin Stefanski's team, to the concepts they ran previously, they have invested in it. I think this is a better room than last year. Jerome Ford, I think, deserves more credit than he gets. You can't criticise the offensive line the last few years, but then just completely ignore that when it comes to Jerome Ford and say, yeah, but he has to be good even despite the offensive line being bad. Running back, yes, the great ones can be as better than what their offensive line is, but more often than not, most guys are as good as their offensive line. And Jerome Ford was not drafted as someone to be Saquon Barkley or Bijan Robinson. This is someone that is drafted to be as a complementary back, and he needs his offensive line to at least be able to create him a lane for him to be effective. So him, Dylan Sampson, Raheem Sanders, of course, are going to be the 3 guys that we see most likely on Sunday. So I expect this run game to be better, but again, similar with the offensive line, how much better, and is it going to be good enough for the Browns to be able to operate Kevin Stefanski's offense at a high enough level to win games and move the ball? Because, they've tried to be more explosive on offense the last few years. It doesn't work. The one probably criticism you could have of Kevin Stefanski's offense is that you're not going to see as many explosive plays in the pass game, and the explosive plays you do get are usually set up through play action. So that makes the run game so much more important. So this run game might be better than we've seen the last few years, but that still doesn't mean it won't be. It'll be good enough for the Browns to be able to move the ball well to actually move the ball enough to be a functioning NFL offense that we haven't seen in the last few years. Another thing as well, the weapons. I mentioned the running backs, but the weapons across the whole offense. Do they have enough guys there? The last few years, it's been pretty underwhelming what we've seen, other than maybe David Njoku and Amari Cooper or then Jerry Jeudy. Outside of that, the Browns' weapons have been pretty limited. They invested in some guys this offseason, whether it was through free agency or the draft. Of course, drafting Quinshon, but probably not going to see him. But Harold Fanning as well. Will we see the weapons on this Browns offense again, similar to the run game as well? Will we see the weapons at least take enough attention away from other guys and be able to cause hassle for the defense and not allow the defense to just zone in on one aspect of the offense or certain guys in the offense, and have enough guys out there that can be productive enough so this offense can be efficient as well as obviously productive. So the offense, as I said, can it look like an NFL offense and just not be a detriment to the team? With how good I expect the defense to be, this offense doesn't have to be lights out to win games. We don't have to see, 2018 Patrick Mahomes. Just do the simple things right, protect the ball, take the layups, and pair that with good defense, and this team should be able to win games and should be able to win more games than people expect. But of course, that is a big question mark with what we've seen from this Browns offense the last couple of seasons. It should give you no encouragement that we are going to see that from this team. So that, of course, is the biggest question mark. As I said, it is the offense. Now, while I expect the defense to be good, as I mentioned, that doesn't mean there aren't some question marks on the defense. I have no questions for the defensive line. If they stay healthy, that is going to be one of the best defensive lines in the NFL. That's going to be the best unit for the Browns. But there are some question marks elsewhere. As I mentioned, that linebacker room, I, of course, as most people, have a lot of faith in Carson Schwarzenegger after what we've seen, through training camp and the preseason. But at the end of the day, he's still a rookie. And, a rookie is going to make some mistakes. So are the Browns solid enough, across the whole room to mask those mistakes from a guy that is going to essentially be the leader in that room? Can they hold up without, obviously, the players that they're not going to have from last year? JOK, of course, missed a large chunk of last year, but even still, and obviously with Jordan Hicks retiring as well. So, they're definitely younger in that room. Diabate, Devin Bush, and Carson Schwarzenegger are the starters. So, can the depth pieces behind them hold up enough, as I said, to master mistakes and to try to make up from the learning curve that Carson will have to go through, as good as we expect him to be? So that, of course, is a question mark with having any rookie having such a big role on a team in any kind of, whether that's on defense or offense. And then, of course, the biggest question mark for the whole defense is that secondary. Denzel Ward is the saving grace. But whilst I personally push back on the injury-prone stuff that a lot of people like to chuck out there for Denzel Ward, it is likely that he will miss at least a couple of games, a game or two in the season. That is just the nature of the position. So, how does the Browns' corner depth hold up behind Denzel? We've, of course, not seen much encouragement out of that depth during training camp and the preseason. Can Newsome return to his 2023 form? Obviously, stepping into likely a more increased role with Emerson being out for the year. Will he play on the outside? Or, will they actually just look to play one of their depth guys on the outside in order to keep Greg on the inside? But I think it's probably more likely he does play on the outside, which, of course, is if is the case, then who the fuck is playing nickel for this team? I don't think we even know that now. With just 4 or 5 days away from the first game. So that is, of course, a big question mark for this team. And as well as that, safety as well. Which safety steps up and fills that role next to Grant best? The Browns, as I mentioned, need a nickel. But they also need someone that can play as that true free safety, something they have really lacked and has been the probably biggest hindrance on this team the last few years on the defense, which, there's not been many things to criticize, but that is definitely one of them. Grant can do it, but having him back there just takes away what he does best on a football field. You're kind of not really getting the best out of him. So, can Hickman have a bounce back year? Can one of the veterans behind him step up into that role? These are all questions that, we need to see answered, because as good as this defense can be this year, if they can't figure out that deep free safety role, if they can't figure out that nickel role, there's areas where they can get exposed on defense, no matter how good the defensive line is, and no matter how good Carson Schwestinger and that linebacker room can be as well. So as good as I expect this defense to be, there is, of course, always going to be question marks on all areas of the team, and that applies to the defense as well. And special teams, will Andre Schmidt be an improvement from Dustin Hopkins? I think everyone was happy that Dustin Hopkins was cut and that they moved on from him. Was really bad last year, the worst starting kicker in the league. Didn't show any improvement in training camp or preseason. So, as happy as we all are that they moved on from him, that doesn't mean that Andrew Schmidt is going to be good. He's technically a rookie. This is his first year in the NFL. So what do we see out of him? Will he be an improvement? Will he make his kicks? Because, the Browns, even if they do win a few more games, they are going to be probably in a lot of close games this year, regardless of their record. So if Andre Schmidt can, make his kicks, that is going to be massive and might be the difference between the team winning 5 games or winning 8 games. So, of course, that is a massive question mark for this team. And as well with the special teams, will Bubba Ventrone, will his unit look better than last year, where they, to be honest, struggled quite a lot? There was quite a few times last year where we were really scratching our heads with what Bubba was doing. And to be honest, in the off-season, when the Browns were making those initial firings, we spoke about Bubba Ventrone as someone that I would not have been surprised if he lost his job with how bad the special teams got at certain points during last year. So, pardon me, will we see a more improved special teams unit overall as well? That is a big question mark for this team. And then finally, the coaching staff. How does Kevin bounce back from last year? That was the first time that I've seen a Kevin Stefanski team quit, to be honest. And, yes, not every year they've had a winning record and gone to the playoffs, but even the years previously, like 2021, and 2022, at least we saw a fight from those teams. At least we saw them 2022, especially with Jacoby Brissett, still being technically within a chance of making the playoffs when just before when Deshaun was coming back from suspension, having the offense that they had there. So, last year really was the first time that I saw a Stefanski Browns team just basically quit on the season. So, will that happen again this year if shit does hit the fan? Or will they be able to be resilient like we saw in 2020, like we saw in 2023? That is a big question mark. And of course, the biggest question mark for Kevin Stefanski and Andrew Berry is, can they do enough this year to keep their jobs? I'm not someone that thinks they're on as hot of a seat as maybe some people do. I think with the comments from the ownership, with how they've operated, you look at this draft, you're not trading away the chance to draft Travis Hunter at number 2 if your job is on the line and you're on the hot seat, and you're not doing that, especially to draft a defensive tackle if that was the case. So I do just think the way that they've operated, the comments from the Haslams we've had this offseason, does make me think that they are, their jobs are safer than some people might think. But of course, that doesn't mean that their jobs are entirely safe. If the Browns go and win one game this year, I don't think there's, anyone will be making arguments that they should keep their jobs. So that, of course, is a big question mark as well. It's not just obviously the offense, the defense, special teams. It's the coaching staff. It's the front office. It's how they handle any adversity that they have this year, and how they handle anything that they have to that comes up this year, whether that's injuries, whether that's whatever. So, as I said, there's a lot of question marks on this team. I like to try and be a bit more positive, shall we say, especially before the season starts, because in the end of the day, every NFL season is a different season. We've seen so many examples of teams that we think are going to be bad, be good. So until they are bad, I'm always going to be optimistic. But again, that doesn't mean that there aren't things that obviously worry me, and aren't things that I am questioning, and things that I need to see from this team before I can believe in certain parts of it. So they're the biggest things for me. Let me know in the comments what your biggest question marks for this team, for the team are this year. What things are you worried about, etc., etc. As I've mentioned, we'll keep doing videos throughout the week leading up to week 1. Got a great guest coming on to preview the Bengals with me. Give a bit more of a view from the Bengals side of it as well. So all of that stuff coming up this week. So if you enjoy my content, then please drop this video a like, hit the subscribe button. It's free, but it really, really helps out my channel. You can also check the links in the description to see where you can follow and interact with me on social media. As I always say, I'm trying to build a community of Cleveland Browns fans, and even if that means I only get to talk to one fan a day, I'm happy, because I'm talking Browns football with the best fan base in the world. Thanks again for watching, guys. Have an amazing rest of the week. I hope everyone's as excited for Sunday as I am, but most importantly, go Browns.